Hi, Joe Novicka here. This is Cup of Joe. Welcome. This week's case asks the question, can a drug addict sue a drug dealer for the wretched life that they are left with? With that question, other powerful questions arise: philosophical, moral, spiritual. Should someone be able to blame others for choices they have made? Does just making the decision to use an illegal substance disqualify a person from turning to the law to make things right? I don't have the answers to these questions for you, but let's talk about the case. Okay, so we have two main individuals here in this case. Consuelo, who's a pot smoker who's addicted to smoking marijuana for about 20 years. And she's the plaintiff in the lawsuit. And then we have Jimmy, who's a convicted drug dealer who's sued by Consuelo. So before we get into the actual case, we need a little background on Jimmy, the drug dealer, who found himself sued in federal court in Brooklyn by what we'd call an avid user of product that he sold to the public. So it was the winter of 2007 when the scorned ex-girlfriend of a pot dealer in Queens stomped her high heels as she purposefully marched into the DEA's Long Island office with her child and proceeded to nobly and happily report that her ex, the father of the child, was selling marijuana and that he was a major player. The DEA believed her, grabbed the ex, and turned him into an informant, leading them to the infamous Jimmy Cournoyer, an international criminal and the biggest marijuana dealer in New York City history. So Jimmy was arrested and then he was indicted by a grand jury in January 2012. It was a while ago. So a month later, he tries to flee to Cancun, but an Interpol red alert went out for his capture, and he was caught by the Mexican police. With ever-mounting evidence amassing against him, Jimmy pled guilty days before his trial was scheduled to begin in May of 2013. So now Consuelo, remember, our pot user, sues Jimmy in 2020 under what's called the New York's Drug Dealer Liability Act. This is the testimony from this case. First, we hear from Consuelo, and she talks about her background, that she says that she's been smoking since high school and has been steadily smoking for 25 years, getting high. And she's asked who the person who sold her the marijuana. She names a couple of people, but remember, they're not Jimmy, okay? And that's important, all right? Because this is the only person that she sued. And she's asked where these other individuals are, and she says maybe they're in jail, maybe they're dead. I really don't know. I haven't spoken to anyone. So then Jimmy's lawyer gets up and cross-examines Consuelo and goes something like this. The lawyer says, "You did not sue either of the two dealers that you mentioned earlier." She says, "No, I don't know where they are." And the lawyer says, "Jimmy never sold you anything directly, did he?" She says, "Not directly." "Yet you named Jimmy in this lawsuit." Consuelo says, "Look, I can read. Jimmy has a reputation as being the biggest pot dealer in New York City history. In fact, that was the title of the New York Times article that I cited in the complaint, so you can read it for yourself." Jimmy takes the stand. "Sir, you pled guilty in 2013 to charges arising out of the operation of a highly sophisticated marijuana sales operation, unprecedented in scale, correct?" "Yeah, that's right." "And you were responsible for smuggling over $1 billion worth of narcotics and weapons, including more than 220,000 pounds of marijuana and over 182 pounds of cocaine and tens of thousands of Molly pills, right?" He says, "I don't know the exact numbers, but yeah." So at the time of your arrest, you drove and owned a limited edition Bugatti Veyron worth $2 million. Not anymore, but yeah, real cream puff, you know? And it's also true that on your BlackBerry that was seized during one of the arrests, there were texts saying that you kept a $2 million slush fund to pay for the murder of anyone who crossed you, right? Yeah, there were texts that said that, but that was just talk. Who is Consuelo? I have no idea. I never met her, Jimmy spoke. Never talked to her, never wrote to her, I swear to God. Are you familiar with the area where Consuelo lives? Yeah. And did any of the product that your organization was involved in moving end up in that neighborhood? No way. That was not my area, and I don't know any dealers that lived in that area. And I don't know of anyone who did business on Facebook. And if I did find out anyone was moving anything through social media, they would have heard it from me. Consuelo, don't know you, don't want to, sorry. So that brings us to the end of the case. Jimmy's attorney argues, I cannot be sued because I had nothing to do with any of the marijuana that went to Consuelo that she bought. And you heard her testify. She said these other guys did it. She has no proof, and she doesn't even suggest that Jimmy had anything to do with that other than he was a major dealer. So it's not fair to hold him responsible. The judge's ruling is this. The only people identified in the complaint as playing a role in the chain of distribution of illegal drugs consumed by Consuelo are the two drug dealers who sold marijuana to her between 2008 and 2018. But they are not defendants in this action. Because Consuelo alleges no discernible connection between her drug purchases and Jimmy's conduct, the complaint must be dismissed. So very simply, plaintiff may not sue someone who has nothing to do with the harms she suffered. And so it goes. Consuelo loses her case. But I do have a question about this, and this should bother some people. When the big pharmaceutical companies are sued, oftentimes the plaintiff doesn't know which of the pharmaceutical companies actually manufactured the drug that caused them harm. So they're allowed to sue a major player. It doesn't have to be the exact player that she knows definitely, but what happens is it's called a market share theory comes into play, where if a company is big enough, you sue them and let them sort out who the manufacturer of the drug was or who was responsible, and let them share in liability for creating a drug that is harmful. So the question is, why would that not apply here? And that's the only issue that I could really think of that could possibly come on appeal, because it's a good law. I mean, some of these drugs that you use, you try once and you're addicted for life. And the thing is that these manufacturers and the dealers know of these effects, and they actually count on these effects. So why shouldn't they be held responsible? That's this week's Cup of Joe. I hope you enjoyed it.